Hello and welcome to Lunch with the Editor. Today we are discussing the car story of our current issue, that is on trafficking of Adivasi girls from Jharkhand. They are brought to Delhi, they are confined, they are raped and they are made to conceive only for their babies to be sold later for prices ranging from 1 lakh to about 4 lakhs per baby. This is an absolutely shocking story we stumbled on. I have with me my colleague Pragya Singh, who investigated the story, who went on tracking victims of trafficking from Delhi to Ranchi. She traveled, and in Delhi also extensively she went around trying to find the trafficked people, the trafficked girls, the victims, and also the most disturbing aspect of the story is about the placement agencies. The role that the placement agencies plays is terrible to say the least. In fact, an activist and also a former member of the Jharkhand State Women's Commission, she has called these placement agencies trafficking agencies. So let's hear from Pragya how exactly she found the business of trafficking, the business of making people pregnant, the business of getting people to conceive kids only for these traffickers to sell the babies.
Okay, so it started actually with random news reports which came from time to time talking about women being trafficked and getting pregnant. And one can say about 3 to 4 times this has come to the notice officially of the Jharkhand police. But what we found in Delhi was that when these cases do come much more often than that, the police doesn't play a role in investigating them. They are seen as cases of rape. For the police to look at these cases as simple cases of rape, they use the word simple every time.
How can rape be simple?
Yes, because
is there a simple rape and a complex rape?
Exactly, they shouldn't call it simple, but they say simple rape in order to make the case that rape is the crime that they are investigating. If there is an intention behind the rape to enforce pregnancy, to traffic in children, that they don't want to talk about. Their argument is that rape is the offense. Rape is what the woman has complained about. If there is a line in an FIR, which is there in the case of the Delhi victim, where she says that she was raped and she was told that she will be made a baby making machine.
Baby making machine. That is the most terrible thing about what we found out. That is mostly children. I mean, these Adivasi girls are primarily children. They are
Yes.
13, 14, 15. I mean, most of them are minor.
Yes, lot of minor girls, but also major women, older women, adult women, adults who do not get jobs in the city as domestic servants, in farmlands, in factories. Why do the agents bring them here? Now the case that we have is of a 30-year-old woman, but her hand, she has a pretty serious disability in one hand. She cannot work in a house, she cannot wash clothes, she cannot do your utensils, she can't look after children. So why was she brought here? She has said in her FIR she was brought here to produce children.
This is terrible. We have heard about stories of children being kidnapped, minors being kidnapped, women being kidnapped from Adivasi areas, brought to Delhi in the pretext of offering them jobs as domestic helps. But now this has gone way beyond that. I mean, this is not even a case of prostitution. This has gone way beyond even prostitution. So this is not even regular trafficking. This is like women, girls being brought from very poor Adivasi villages to Delhi. They are locked up, they are raped repeatedly, and at times you have even written about a case wherein a woman was injected.
Yes.
So it was not even, it was artificial insemination.
She actually is so young, that she was so young when the crime took place that she seems to not remember exactly what happened. How she got pregnant, she doesn't know. What she knows is that she was taken repeatedly to hospitals for a 3-month period. After that, she was moved to another house, which is when she became pregnant. She stayed in that house for another 3 months. and during that time she was
So
confined.
she doesn't talk about
drowsy.
getting raped.
She's not sure. She cannot say. She was around 15 when it happened. For her, the pregnancy is a mystery, because also, you know, she was very, very young. She didn't even have a boyfriend, or she had not spoken to anybody about sex. So she finds it hard to say how she got pregnant. And this is the reason why, this is what the activists say, this is the reason why very young girls are chosen, because they cannot identify even when they become pregnant.
So this girl also became pregnant?
Yes, she became
Did
pregnant.
she give birth to children?
No, she did not. She managed to run away, and she had a late abortion, an illegal abortion, actually, in the village. So yeah, she had a very, very tough time, because you see, she did not want to tell anybody that this has happened with her. Nobody. Father, mother, brother, sister, nobody. So the only choice, she tried to kill herself many times. That's what she says. That her suicide attempts continued for about a month, and then somebody helped her finally get an abortion. After which she had to move out of the state. She lives in Bihar now. You know,
It's become so institutional that the Jharkhand cops have a term for this. They're calling it forced surrogacy.
Yes.
So it is. I mean, it is not as if they are not aware of it. The Jharkhand police are very clearly aware of what is happening, and they have even coined a term for this: forced surrogacy. And still, nothing really is happening. And even when there is a case here in Delhi, when somebody is opening up, when a victim is talking about many women being brought here and many women being raped and made to conceive, the police aren't taking any action.
The police is not taking action on these claims. The police says rape hai, which is true, rape hai.
Even when they know that such a racket is running.
They say there is no such racket running. They say that we will investigate the rape, we will catch the rapist whenever we catch him. He is right now free. So they say that हम जब rape investigate करेंगे और लड़की she has got her she has got pregnant. Now the strange thing about the Delhi case is that the girl alleges, the woman alleges that I was told that I will be made pregnant. On so and so date I was raped. She runs away 15 days later. Her pregnancy, the police has found, was, when they got the medical test done, was 15 days old. So now we know that they are timing it very precisely, right? So this is the allegation she has made, that they were timing me when to rape me to make me pregnant. She has got 15 days pregnancy. So why is it still being seen as a case of rape?
This is the terrible story of Adivasi girls being brought to Delhi for a new racket to turn them into baby making machines. In fact, a former member of the Jharkhand State Women's Commission, Dr. Vasavi Kiro, she says that there is no escape from the slave trade. She calls it a slave trade. So that is what we had brought out as our cover story in the current issue. I also have my colleague Pranay Sharma here with me to discuss what is happening at The Hague, at the International Court of Justice, where India is clashing with Pakistan over Kulbhushan Jadhav, whom Pakistan claims as an Indian spy and has been sentenced to death by the Pakistani military court. So the fight is on at The Hague, and how do you see it getting played out?
See, I mean, there's a lot of interest in both countries now, and as things have panned out, it has also got a lot of international traction. It's no longer only an India-Pakistan thing, because now the ICJ is involved in it, and so I'm sure, I mean, there will be a lot of focus, lot of traction to this, not only in India and Pakistan, but much beyond. The way it is going to, I think, what will happen? One, the Indian government, because the Pakistani side almost forced India's hand by not giving it access to
Consular access.
Yeah, which was a must. And they kept denying that. So now, after, depending on how the court rules, and if the court rules in favor of what India has been asking, that that it should be given consular access, then perhaps we'll have another story, because we don't even know what story Kulbhushan has to say. So far,
is it true that Kulbhushan was not even in Pakistani territory, and that he was on the Iranian side of the border, and he was kidnapped and brought to Pakistan?
that's right. That's true.
Is that the dominant narrative?
That is the dominant narrative, at least from the Indian side. This is what we've heard. Pakistanis, they've been claiming that he was picked up well within Pakistani territory and not brought in from any place, and he was involved in activities.
But would a spy ever carry his passport of the country of origin?
Several questions are there. Absolutely right what you're asking, and these are the questions that people are asking as well. Not only in India, even if you take a step back, you would wonder, I mean, if it's a seasoned spy, as they claim he is, will he be carrying documents along with him, so he can...
To prove that he's a spy.
So that's the whole thing. And now, so far what we've heard, Pakistan claims that a proper military court has tried him, all that, they have gone through that process, but there is only one side. That's only one narrative. The other side we don't know. So once he...
What does the Indian government aim to achieve by internationalizing this conflict or this issue?
See, it's in a very limited point. Both countries are party to the Vienna Convention, and according to which you will have to give access, consular access to each other's national if they are arrested. That is all what India is asking. Because what happens from this, as I was pointing out earlier, that we so far have heard a Pakistani version which they claim that he was involved in espionage or terrorist activities. Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know. We don't even know what Kulbhushan has to say. Once the Indian side are given that access, they'll come up with some kind of version. They will know exactly what he told them or what he says or denies. So that is important.
So we still don't know how it is going to play out.
One way I think, because while this is happening, some other developments are also taking place in Pakistan. Say for instance, they are also trying to get an extension for Hafiz Saeed's detention. He's under house arrest, but the Pakistani authorities are also arguing. So in a way, Pakistan, I think, is also a little worried about its image. The image of a country which has so many terrorist outfits operating from its territory and doing not much about it to stop.
Not merely operating, I mean, they are being celebrated by the military intelligence establishment.
So that is something where we see a shift taking place, or an attempt at least.
Pranay, that brings us to the other big international issue, the Belt and Road Forum meeting that happened yesterday. So, do you think that it was a wise decision from the Indian side for not participating, boycotting the meet completely, keeping away?
Frankly, I think I don't agree with that stand. Though that is what the government has decided. I think we could have lowered our participation in it. May not be at a very high level.
A complete boycott?
A complete boycott, I don't think, was the right thing to do. We could have registered our protest. We had already done that. We could have done it even more. But by totally being out of it, I think, I don't agree with that.
But at the same time, we had to take exception to the China-Pakistan economic corridor, because it is actually passing through Indian territory. I mean, what we claim as Indian territory, whether we have it with us or not, it is in the Pakistani possession, but then it is Indian territory. So how do you take exception to it if you are participating?
That's exactly my point. That it does not dilute the position of India, that this is an area which we claim as ours. And you cannot really, or what will be the position? You are having a project which you are spending more than 50 billion for this. Now what happens that tomorrow if, it comes back to India? So are you willing to now renegotiate with India? What will happen? These are all open questions. and without prejudicing others, that if India, in a way, it was seen that if India agrees to it, it will be seen that, oh, India agrees to it, so maybe India does not have a claim any longer on that. So I think that is why
it was a bit of a catch-22 situation.
True, but still, I think, India could have registered its protest, made it very clear, and participate, because they said, because the way we see China, it is the number of areas on which we cooperate with it, there are a number of areas where we have serious differences, so we want to continue that relationship, though we have our strong reservations on this particular project.
It was a bit dicey. If you participate, it would seem as if you are accepting the position that this is not your own territory. If you don't participate, you would seem as if painting yourself into a corner. So it was a catch-22 situation, and the Indian government decided that it will not be part of probably one of the most exciting projects in this century.
True.
That is a Belt and Road project that is being unleashed by China, which will take China, which will help China build probably communication highways straight from Asia to Europe.
Absolutely.
So it is still, it is still very difficult to comprehend. It is still very difficult to perceive how big and how massive this new project would be. So we have decided to keep ourselves out of it, at least for the time being, primarily because of the China-Pakistan economic corridor that runs across Aksai Chin, which India claims to be its territory, which is occupied by Pakistan, which is part of the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So that is probably the other very big international development. And again, we need to see how we calibrate our steps, how India calibrates its steps, and how China responds, because China's punctual statement seemed to be aimed primarily at India.
Absolutely. And this is what they're trying to say. And if you look at the Chinese ambassador to India, what he has been talking about, meaning, I think, there have been a lot of positive signals which are coming out, both from India and also from Pakistan. So I think we will have to keep the big picture in mind. Yes, what's happening in Hague may be taking a lot of our focus now, but if you look at the big picture, that other signals are also coming out, where both sides are trying to say that let's try and resolve the differences, let's try and lower the temperature, and try and see if we can create an atmosphere where we can restart or resume our dialogue, our engagement in a meaningful manner.
So we need to see, Hague is taking a lot of mind space. Hague is right there up front, but it is also connected. It is also one way or the other linked to our regional stability. And China is looming large as not just a regional power, but probably another superpower, even even aiming to surpass US interests, at least in this region. So that was all for this edition of Lunch with Editor. This is Rajesh Ramachandran signing off. Thank you.